Kamala Harris went on Alex Cooper's Call Her Daddy podcast, and surprise, surprise, they got literally everything wrong. So we will be fact checking them today. And also, Elon Musk talks about toxic empathy. Kind of. We'll get into all of that on today's episode of Relatable. It's brought to you by our friends at Good Ranchers. Go to goodranchers.com, use code Allie at checkout. That's goodranchers.com, code Allie. Hey guys, welcome to Relatable. Happy Wednesday. Hope everyone has had a wonderful week so far. All right, I am thinking about and praying for our friends in Florida in the path of Hurricane Milton. I'm sure you guys are just so exhausted. And I'm not only praying for Florida, I'm also praying for the southeast of the United States, North Carolina, East Tennessee, even parts of South Carolina and Georgia that have been affected by Hurricane Helene. You guys are still recovering, and we don't have time today to get into all of the different theories and concerns and questions about the recovery and rescue effort, what part the government has played and has not played in the past couple weeks there. We will have an episode dedicated to that, going through a lot of the questions, what some people are calling the conspiracies. But I just want to make sure that we have all of the facts on that before I just present you with the theories, because I don't want to cause more confusion and more chaos, especially to a people that really need as much clarity and stability as possible right now. So as soon as we have all the sufficient information and research on that, we're going to dig into some of those questions. But for those of you who want to contribute to recovery efforts in Florida, I encourage you, donate to pregnancy centers in Florida. There's one in particular that I've been connected to. I had the privilege of meeting the people that run this clinic in Brandon, Florida. So they're a bit inland. They're outside of Tampa, but they really serve the larger area around them, including Tampa. This is Choices Clinic. They're a pro-life pregnancy center around or outside of Tampa, and they are saving babies' lives by serving their mothers, providing them with free resources that make it easier to welcome this little life into the world. And they have sent me a link to their baby registry on Amazon, and we will link that in the description of this episode. Please donate whatever you can. We can also link the website of that clinic if you just want to donate funds to them directly. But they're taking things like pack and plays, diapers, wipes, onesies, all kinds of things. They're probably going to have even greater needs than ever in the coming weeks. And they've asked that, because we asked about timing. They've asked that you would go ahead and donate if you can. They can go ahead and get those resources very quickly. That's one great thing about Amazon. They can get there today, they can get there overnight, and they can go ahead and receive those. And because they are a bit inland, they can actually receive more items than maybe some of the clinics that are actually in Tampa, but they can still serve those in the entire area. So go ahead, go to the description of this episode and donate whatever you can via Amazon, and just continue to lift these people up in prayer. When disaster strikes, that's when we see Christians stand up. You've seen a lot of understandably fearful people, stranded people, vulnerable people, and the past few weeks feel completely abandoned by the government, which is supposed to be made up of public servants. And in that vacuum, you've seen a fearless church. You've seen a courageous church. You've seen Christians doing what Christians have always done since the inception of the church, and that is seek and rescue the lost, physically and then also spiritually, as we share the gospel and we make clear that the love and generosity that we have for other people is because of God's love and generosity toward us. The grace and the mercy that we show others, the compassion that we show others, is because of the grace, the mercy, the compassion that was poured out for us undeservedly, of course, on the cross. And so I'm so thankful for the church. I'm not thankful, of course, for what I find to be a dereliction of duty, by the government, but I am thankful for how that darkness has allowed the church to shine so brightly, because that is what it does. So praise the Lord for that. Thank you, Holy Spirit, for being our helper, for giving us bravery and boldness. And thank you to everyone who has sent material resources. Even if you are struggling yourself in these economically turbulent times, your generosity, just like the widow's mite, means a lot to the Lord, and it can make a difference in the lives of people. So just continue to pray and to keep these people in mind. All right, today we're going to be fact checking some stuff, because as a part of the country is really struggling, Kamala Harris is going on her podcast tour, which I can't necessarily blame her for doing, because this is a campaign. She does want to win. I've seen a lot of people say this is entirely inappropriate for her to be going on podcasts while she is not only running for president, but she is serving as vice president right now, and Americans are suffering. And I see that perspective. On the other hand, I can also see why, just objectively, why her campaign would want to go ahead and take this opportunity, because she is gunning for the white woman vote. If you've been paying attention, that's who she's been focusing on from the very beginning. She wants every white woman vote that she can get. She knows she does not have to fight for the black vote, especially the black female vote. You can get mad at that all you want to. We'll see the polling numbers after this election. She does not have to fight for their votes. She has to fight for the white woman vote. This was a huge opportunity to do that, and being on this podcast, Call Her Daddy. And so I could see why she did it. The optics don't look good. It's not great PR in a lot of ways. If I had been her team, I probably would have said, yes, we're taking this opportunity, but let's hold the episode for a couple weeks. And even, I'm just speaking cynically and politically here, even just for the sake of visuals, for the sake of PR, I would have said, let's get Harris out there on the ground in Florida, on the ground in the Southeast. Make sure people know that this is her number one priority, that she's really serving these people, passing out water bottles, and then we can put out the Call Her Daddy episode. That would have been, I think, just from a strategic perspective, the best bet. Of course, the best thing to do would be for her to really, really care about what's going on among her fellow Americans and those hurting. But I'm not sure if we can really expect that at this point. President Trump, on the other hand, has been on the ground, and it does seem that he has been listening to these people and helping how he can. And that is good strategy-wise, but it's also just the right thing to do. But all of that aside, we need to look at the substance of this episode. Will people be convinced by it? Will they be persuaded by it? Maybe, but only if you don't have very much knowledge and if you have very few critical thinking skills. You don't even have to be a conservative or a Christian to listen to some of what was said and ask yourself, does that sound right? Is that really true? So we're going to be digging into that today and hopefully equip you with some tools as you are talking about all of these crazy topics with your friends in the coming weeks, because the election is coming up, y'all. It is less than a month away. Insane. And so now's the time to be bold and to represent what you know is true and all the conversations that you have. All right. Before we get into all that fact checking, let me pause, tell you about our first sponsor for the day, and it is Cozy Earth. I love Cozy Earth. Maybe you live in a part of the country where you actually can feel cozy. It's a little brisk outside and you can warm yourself up by the fire, and you're looking for some luxurious loungewear. And so you need to check out Cozy Earth, because you will love their pajamas. You will love their loungewear. It will keep you so cozy, so warm. This is the best loungewear that I have ever owned. I have a quarter zip that I wear all the time, even though where I live, we don our fall costume, meaning we might wear a sweater, but it is not actually needed. We are wearing it to represent that we are in autumn, even though our weather tells us that it is the 4th of July. And yet I still wear my Cozy Earth because it is temperature regulating. It is really breathable, not just their clothing, but especially their sheets. I love their sheets. I love their towels. towels. I got their new waffle towels recently. Love them. I never want to use anything else. If you go to cozyearth.com/relatable, you can use my code relatable and you'll get up to 40% off. That's cozyearth.com/relatable for up to 40% off with code relatable. All right, Call Her Daddy. If you've never heard of Call Her Daddy, congratulations. That is very good. In fact, I think that you are holier than everyone else simply for never having heard of the title of this podcast, and I'm very sorry to corrupt you, but unfortunately it is now interfered with our political discussions, and so we have to talk about it. I first heard about Call Her Daddy several years ago, probably when I was starting Relatable, because it was such a popular podcast, and I've never listened to Call Her Daddy because it was pretty obvious what it was about. It was begun by two women, Sophia Franklin and Alex Cooper, and they really just talked about sex. And that's really all it was about. And then Cooper and Franklin, they had a whole falling out. We could do an entire episode analyzing that drama. And that was in 2020. But then a year later, Cooper landed a $60 million deal with Spotify. So she became the sole host of Call Her Daddy. Sophia Franklin tried to go off and do her own thing. That didn't work. So I'm sure Alex Cooper is feeling like she made the right decision. It has now become the most listened to podcast by women on Spotify. It was Spotify's second biggest podcast last year. And she also just signed a deal, I believe, Brie, with SiriusXM for $125 million. Okay. So this has been a sex podcast. I don't know if she would continue to call it a sex podcast. I think she would probably call it just a culture podcast because she's had Simone Biles, Hailey Bieber, Megan Fox, Gwyneth Paltrow on. But the titles of the episodes are still very X-rated. Cheating 101, My Revenge Porn Experience, an episode about slut camp, some things that I literally can't say. It's very graphic. Basically, she talks about, and this is her brand and has been her entire brand, being promiscuous and trying to present the case that women are just like men when it comes to sex, that they want sex just as much as men do. They can sleep around just as much as men have slept around, and they don't have any emotional attachments to those men. It means nothing to them on a spiritual or moral level. And unfortunately, there are people, even conservatives, there are Trump supporters who faithfully listen to the Call Her Daddy podcast. And it should not be surprising that Alex Cooper is also a lib. Not surprising at all, because as much as the Democrats say that they're about freedom and liberty, they're actually about libertinism. When they're talking about freedom, as we've said before, they're talking about two things. They're not talking about your First and Second Amendment rights. They're not talking about your bodily autonomy when it comes to vaccines. They're not talking about free speech, freedom of religion, or even your ability to defend yourself how you see fit. They're not talking about those things. When Democrats talk about freedom, they're talking about two things, and two things that go hand in hand: sexual immorality and abortion. So they're not really even talking about liberty in the positive sense. They are talking about libertinism. They're talking about sexual degeneracy, your freedom to do all kinds of sexually depraved things and to be celebrated and affirmed in those choices, but also your choice to kill your baby. And so when they say that they are on the side of freedom, they're always talking about those two things, whether it's pornography in schools, whether it's teaching kids in school that they are born in the wrong body, whether it's mutilating a person, even a minor's body, in the name of gender identity, or talking about two men being able to employ subsidized reproductive health services to buy eggs and rent wombs to have a child, and forcing you, by the way, to pay taxes in support of that. Freedom always falls under those two umbrellas. They're not talking about the freedoms that actually affect your life in a positive way. They're talking about the freedoms that hurt us as a society and specifically hurt children. So it shouldn't be surprising that someone who has talked about slut camp and how women should sleep around as much as possible is a liberal. Of course, she aligns with their definitions of right and wrong. It also shouldn't surprise us that Alex Cooper is a big supporter of abortion. Her website, Alex Cooper's website, she uses a free news headline to talk to her, to take users to abortion information on her site. And it says, if you're looking for financial support for abortion care, so if you need help paying someone to kill your baby, to poison or starve or dismember your baby, then Alex Cooper makes that as easy as possible. It's no surprise that President Trump, by the way, denied the request to be on this show. Some people said, well, that's a mistake. This is a huge show. There are a lot of people that listen to or watch her that love Trump. It could have humanized him. Look, that was never going to be a good idea. She would have trapped him with all kinds of questions. It's so obvious that she is against him. Now, he could have probably charmed her, but he would have ended up saying a lot of dumb stuff that would have made conservatives and evangelicals and pro-lifers even madder than they already are at Trump. And again, just the timing with the hurricane, I don't think was smart. So that's why we only have Kamala Harris. So Alex Cooper claimed that she prepared 7 different versions of the interview when trying to decide which topics to cover: the economy, border control, fracking. And yeah, that's a little bit hard to believe, because while she might be savvy business wise, I think that's absolutely true. And so she's got her smarts in her own way. You will hear as she talks, she's not secretly brilliant. She's not. She doesn't really know what she's talking about at all. Her arguments are not good. It's not just that she has a Valley Girl voice, but underneath all of that is some like scholarly, really deep and wise person. No, she is very superficial and just not very smart when it comes to this stuff. She says that she landed on this: the conversation I know I'm qualified to have is one surrounding women's bodies, right? And how we are treated and valued in this country. Actually, you have no authority whatsoever, because you have been convincing women, preaching to women about denigrating their bodies and objectifying their bodies and being used by men for pleasure for years. I mean, who knows how many hearts have been broken, how many bodies have been harmed, how many relationships have been severed, how much mental stability and peace have been robbed from women because of Alex Cooper's podcast. So you have the authority to talk about this in the same way that Satan has the authority to talk about righteousness. He only knows about righteousness because he knows a lot about sin. So in that sense, Sure. So about 20 minutes in, they're talking about abortion. And of course, they go back and forth on a lot of different propaganda, using toxic empathy to try to say that the woman is actually the victim in the abortion scenario, and to try to say all of these laws restrict a woman from being able to exercise her bodily autonomy. She uses the example of a woman who is raped. She should have control of what happens to her body next if she was impregnated. That's why she needs an abortion. Just a reminder that rape is less than 1% of every of abortion cases in America. Less than 1%. That's according to the Guttmacher Institute. The Guttmacher Institute is the Planned Parenthood research arm. And of course, Kamala Harris, and no pro-choice person that I know, only believes in exceptions for rape or incest. They only bring that up to create this narrative of toxic empathy and make you forget about the baby who is actually the one bearing the brunt of abortion. And by the way, abortion doesn't fix rape. The rapist should get the death penalty, not the baby who did nothing wrong. But again, that is a very small percentage of the women who are seeking abortions. And there's no reason to bring that up unless you believe that that should be the only exception for abortion. Kamala Harris does not care how a baby was conceived. when it comes to whether or not a woman should have a right to abortion. She thinks no matter what the reason is, a woman should have a right to abortion. And then she brings out what she has said many times, because she's gunning not only for the white woman vote, but for the Christian mom vote specifically. And this is how they use toxic empathy. This is how she even uses and misuses and abuses theology. She says, you don't have to abandon your deeply held beliefs. You don't have to abandon your faith to agree the government shouldn't be telling her what to do. If she chooses, she can talk to her priest, her pastor, her rabbi, or her imam, but not the government telling you what to do. Look, if the government does not have a role in protecting innocent people from being murdered, then the government doesn't have a role in anything. By this logic, it should not be illegal to kill anyone outside of the womb. It shouldn't be illegal to do anything. Of course, it is the government's job, even according to the Bible in Romans 13, to tell people what to do and what not to do. And there are punishments when people do something that they are not supposed to do. The government doesn't have a say in everything. Of course, I, as a Republican, don't believe that the government should have a say in everything. But when it comes to protecting our inherent rights of life, liberty, the pursuit of property, yes, the government has a role. One of the government's primary functions is to protect innocent life from being assaulted, from being violated, from being murdered. So if the government doesn't have a role in protecting babies inside the womb, then they don't have a role to do anything. Cooper responds with how little men seem to know about women's bodies. Here's not one.
I have seen girls on the street walk up to men and be like, do you know where a tampon goes? Do you know how many tampons we use? Do you even know how, do you know what a X or Y or Z is of a part of our, and they don't know the answer.
I was the first vice president or president to ever in office go to a reproductive health care clinic, ever.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that, but I guess that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that she was going to say that I was the first vice president to ever use a tampon. I don't understand how her response correlated with what Alex Cooper said there. And of course, this is a euphemism. Reproductive health clinic is a euphemism for an abortion clinic. And clinic is even a euphemism. Abortion mill, abortion provider would probably, abortion perpetrator would probably be a better name for that institution. And that's the thing, of course, that we've talked about a lot when it comes to abortion. If abortion were so great, if it really were something that we should all celebrate, a choice that we should all get behind, they would be able to use exact language. They would use that as their advertising and marketing campaign. If abortion were really that great, they would be the ones with the billboards and the signs saying, here's an aborted fetus. Here is what the process looks like. Here's exactly what we do when we provide an abortion to a woman. If abortion were really that great, then they would be telling you exactly what it is using exact and scientific language. But because the law of God is written on the human heart, even Planned Parenthood knows that showing people what happens in an abortion is a major turnoff. It's too barbaric. If people saw the little babies with the severed arms and legs, with the crushed skulls, if they saw their little bloody fingers and toes, if they knew what happens when a baby is sucked out of the womb with a vacuum or dismembered with forceps, if they were there in the room watching that happen on an ultrasound, they would no longer be pro-choice. And they would say, this is murder. The government has to step in. They've got to do something. These are people that can feel pain and they don't deserve to die. They deserve the same human right that you and I do. But instead, they have to rely on lies. They have to rely on propaganda. They have to rely on this euphemistic language like bodily autonomy, like women's rights, like reproductive health care, like terminating a pregnancy, even like fetus. Fetus is not the medical term. It is just the Latin word for offspring or small child. And the only reason the word fetus is used is because they know that baby sounds too human. And yet he or she is a human. Scientifically, she is a human from the point of conception. And so if you support abortion, you need to be able to articulate in a cogent way why you believe it should be legal to kill some innocent people. Why? Size, location, sentience, development, wantedness. If any of those are your reasons, do they apply to people outside of the womb too? Should we be able to kill a 5-year-old, a 15-year-old because they're smaller than a 30-year-old, because they're not wanted, because they have a hard life, because they're poor, because they have special needs, because they don't understand what's going on, they don't have sentience? Are those reasons to kill people outside of the womb? If they're not reasons to kill people outside of the womb, why are they reasons to kill people inside the womb? Surely it's not location or dependence, because, again, those are very arbitrary reasons to justify murder. I'm not sure that Alex Cooper has thought through those things, though. Hopefully, maybe some of her listeners have. Okay, let me pause, tell you about our next sponsor for the day, and that is Good Ranchers. Y'all, I've got a Good Ranchers box now, my very own Allie box. We will even put up a picture of me holding my Allie box, and let me tell you what's in it. This is based on what we in the Stuckey household use the most. We've got 16 4.5-ounce plain chicken breasts, 2 1-pound Angus ground beef packs, 8 6-ounce American Wagyu and Angus beef patties, 2 18-ounce bone-in ribeyes, and a limited edition collectible recipe card featuring one of my favorite chicken recipes. This is enough for approximately 37 meals. And if you get my box every month, like, you are covered. You're never going to have a day where you're like, gosh, I have nothing to cook for dinner tonight. You're always going to have meat to thaw. You can be creative with it. That's why I love the ground beef and plain chicken, because there's so much that you can do with it. You can make it really simple, or you can make it really fun. I love making tacos with both of these things and adding my own seasoning and spice to it. And so go ahead and go to goodranchers.com/Allie. Use code Allie for $25 off. That's goodranchers.com/Allie, code Allie. Okay, Alex Cooper also tries to justify her support for abortion with her Catholicism. She is trying to say that she had an episode where she explained her position that, just because I'm personally against it, which I'm not even sure that she would totally say, but basically, if you're personally against it because of your faith, that doesn't mean that you should be against it for someone else. Here's thought 2.
I was raised Catholic, and abortion is a sin. And when I put out that episode, I had a lot of women reach out to me saying, like, wow, I live in the South and I never thought about it that way. Like, maybe I am pro-choice because I won't get an abortion because of my religion, but why should we control what someone else wants to do?
In state after state, so-called red states and so-called blue states, when this issue has been on the ballot, the American people are voting for freedom, because ultimately it's about, look, this is not about imposing my thoughts on you in terms of what you do with your life or your body. It's actually quite the opposite. It's saying the government shouldn't be telling people what to do.
Again, going back to what we've already said, the government tells people what to do. That is the role of the government. Kamala Harris understands that. She actually believes that the government should be able to tell you a lot of things that constitutionally they can't do. Like, I would just remind you that when she was Attorney General, that she pushed the FACT Act, which required pro-life pregnancy centers to advertise for abortion. She wanted to force them, compel their speech to promote a procedure that they were working to prevent. That's who Kamala Harris is. That's what she championed. And thankfully, the Supreme Court overturned the law that she championed while she was Attorney General of California. Why? Because it's a clear violation of the First Amendment. Remember that she also went after David Daleiden, the pro-life reporter that went undercover to investigate Planned Parenthood for an alleged pay-for-play scheme where it seemed like they were exchanging baby body parts for profit. She sicked authorities on David Daleiden, raided his home, took his tapes, never investigated Planned Parenthood. Even if it turned out that Planned Parenthood was innocent in that case, don't you think, as the chief law enforcement officer in the state of California, you should want to see if there's any illegal activity going on instead of violating the First Amendment rights, the freedom of David Daleiden, who, by the way, several years later, even though she is not in charge of California politics anymore, like he is still stuck in a legal battle over his investigative work. She doesn't care at all about your freedoms. Again, when they say freedom, they're talking about abortion or sexual degeneracy. That is all she is talking about. She does not believe in your liberty at all. She was completely behind the Biden administration's mandate for businesses to require the vaccines for their employees. She was completely behind requiring nurses, frontline workers to take an experimental vaccine that led to the laying off of many nurses when there was already a shortage. That's who Kamala Harris is. She doesn't actually care about your freedom. She just wants that money from Planned Parenthood. Plus, she personally and ideologically supports the killing of babies. And just again, yes, you do have to suspend your sincerely held Christian beliefs to support abortion. You simply do. Now, Trump is not as pro-life as I want him to be. They've been squishy on that. But you saw how he changed his mind when it came to Amendment 4 in Florida. And so you know that he can be influenced toward life. Thankfully, he did give us the justices that gave us Roe v. Wade, which, by the way, if this is a libertarian issue for you, if this is a freedom issue for you, you should be happy that it's gone to the states, that the people in the states can elect the representatives to then decide the law that dictates how abortion is restricted and regulated. Now, I think it's horrific because I'm in the exact opposite position of where Kamala Harris is. I think it's horrific that this is a states' rights issue like slavery was, because the right to life is a human right that shouldn't be up for legislative debates in the states. They think the same thing, by the way. Tim Walz made that very clear in the debate, but they just think it's abortion. The right to kill the child is the fundamental human right that shouldn't be infringed. And they're exactly wrong. There's no constitutional right to that. There's no moral right to that. And we on this side are exactly right, that it is, of course, a constitutional, fundamental, moral, God-given right to not be murdered as an innocent person, whether you are in or outside of the womb. Then Cooper repeats this Amber Thurman lie, the woman who died in Georgia because she was pregnant with twins. It was after the limit in Georgia. She traveled to North Carolina. She missed her appointment. She got abortion pills without even seeing the doctor. She suffered complications from the abortion pills, and unfortunately, she died. She should have been given antibiotics. She should have been given a DNC. But really, if there had actually been a ban on abortion pills, all three of these image bearers of God would be alive. And yet, they repeat the lie. Alex Cooper repeats the lie that because of the Georgia pro-life law, she is dead, that the doctors were too afraid to treat her because of the Georgia pro-life law. That's not true at all. It actually would have been legal even if the babies had been alive in Amber Thurman's womb. At that point in Georgia, she would have been legally able to get an abortion because Georgia makes an exception for the life of the mother. But the babies were already dead in her womb. And so it absolutely was legal for her to get a DNC. It is not the fault of the pro-life law. Every pro-life law on the books makes an exception for the life of the mother. But again, just because there's a pro-life law doesn't mean that women are being victimized. This is another example of that toxic empathy where you're supposed to forget about the fact. We're not supposed to be sad about the fact that there are twin babies, innocent people who were brutally murdered and died in this story. I can feel sad that Amber Thurman died, that she left her baby an orphan. I mean, where is the dad? We don't know about that. But poor child. But if there had actually been a ban on abortion, if she had not been able to get those abortion pills in North Carolina, all three of those people would be alive right now. But of course, they push this propaganda about we need abortion to save a mother's life. That is not medically true. It's not scientifically true. We just talked to the OBGYN last week. We can link the description or link it in the description of this episode. You can listen to her. There is not a reason to purposely kill a child in the womb to save a mother's life. There's just not. And it's funny because Harris says, you believe there's an exception if the life of the mother is at risk. You know what that means in practical terms. She's almost dead before you can give her care. So we're going to have public health policy that says a doctor, a medical professional, she had to clarify because Planned Parenthood does not want there to be a doctor requirement. They want anyone who is on staff at Planned Parenthood to be able to provide an abortion. Waits until you're at death's door before you give care. That's outrageous that anybody would be saying that that is acceptable policy. Where's the humanity? There's no humanity in abortion. There's none. It's bad for women and it's bad for babies inside the womb. It's bad for society as a whole. There's no humanity, no compassion in abortion. This is all a perfect example of toxic empathy, and I will give you more examples of that in this episode and in their exchange in just a second. But I do want to tell you about my book, Toxic Empathy, How Progressives Exploit Christian Compassion. It's out on October 15th, and it really helps if you pre-order it because then Amazon can get the right amount and it won't say out of stock. Everyone who wants one will get one. In the first chapter that we talk about, we go through 5 lies. The first lie is that abortion is healthcare. And there's a quote from R.C. Sproul at the top. If I know anything at all about God, I know that God hates abortion. That doesn't mean there's not grace and forgiveness for those who have gone through abortion, but God hates the slaughter of innocent children. And just as we do at the start of every chapter, we tell you a very heart-rending story, a gut-wrenching story about a woman that seems to need an abortion. And we do the same kind of heart-rending story when it comes to gender and when it comes to sexuality and marriage, when it comes to immigration and social justice. But in this one, we tell the story of a woman that NPR says needed an abortion because her baby had a fetal anomaly. And yet in Texas, she was forced to give birth to this baby, even though she was very poor. And they paint this very sad picture so that at the end of it, you have so much empathy for what this woman went through that you forget about the abortion, you forget about the child altogether, and you think these pro-life laws are so draconian, they're so cruel, we have to stand against them for the sake of the mother. But then, and this is the same formula we follow in every chapter, we back up and we say, okay, we've gotten you to feel empathy for the mother, but what about the person at the other side, on the other side of this moral equation? Let's look at the baby. In this case, the baby is named Halo. And we look at what she would have gone through if she would have been aborted at 20 weeks because of her diagnosis. Instead of being delivered and clothed and carried and held and buried, she would have been brutally dismembered and discarded like toxic waste. Where is our empathy for her? But then, just as we do in every chapter, we say, okay, we feel empathy for both parties in this story. But that only gets us so far. That's why we cannot be primarily led by empathy. We have to be led by the truth. Because the God who is love says that love rejoices with the truth. That's 1 Corinthians 13:6. So what is the truth? What's the truth about abortion? What's the history of abortion? Who started Planned Parenthood? What is her ideological legacy? What actually happens in an abortion? What is the role of the government when it comes to abortion? How does that save lives? What about the evangelicals who say that you can be holistically pro-life and still vote Democrat? How do we respond to all of those things? And I've equipped you with every argument possible in every chapter of this book when it comes to abortion, gender, sexuality, social justice, and immigration. I tell you from a factual, historical, scientific perspective, the conservative response to these things, and I try my best to also give a complete biblical response on each of these subjects. After you read this book, look how short it is. It's really short. You will be totally equipped to have every controversial conversation in the coming weeks with your friends, with your family members, you will feel completely confident. That's what I want. So go ahead and pre-order it. We will link it in the description of this episode, and you can go ahead and buy it now. Buy some for your friends. Maybe walk through it as a small group or with a group of your friends. There's so much to discuss in there. And it would really help me out a lot if you go ahead and pre-order. It's also on Audible if you like to listen to books, and it is me reading it. So Toxic Empathy, go ahead and order now if you haven't already. All right, let me tell you about our next sponsor for the day, and that is Crowd Health. Health insurance is really confusing. I don't have to tell you that. It can be really expensive. It can feel really frustrating. It can feel that even if you have health insurance, you don't actually have it, or you don't have the coverage that you need. And so maybe it's time for you to opt out of the health insurance structure altogether and opt for Crowd Health. You can share your health expenses with a community of people who are willing to help out in the event of an emergency. And it's really affordable. For $175 for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more, you get access to the Crowd, to telemedicine visits, also discounted prescriptions, so much more without doctors' networks getting in the way. The Crowd is a group of members just like you who want to help pay for each other's unexpected medical events. Let Crowd Health help with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 a month for your first 3 months. Go to joincrowdhealth.com/Allie. Crowd Health is not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com/Allie. Alex Cooper also said in the debate, former President Trump claimed that some states are executing babies after birth. Can you just clarify? Here's thought 3.
That is not happening anywhere in the United States. It is not happening, and it's a lie. It's a bold-faced lie that he is suggesting that. Can you imagine? He is suggesting that women in their 9th month of pregnancy are electing to have an abortion. Are you kidding? That is so outrageously inaccurate, and it's so insulting.
Well, actually, of course, it is true. We remember Governor Northam a few years ago on radio saying that if a baby survives an abortion, the baby will be put off to the side, and then the parents and the doctor can decide what to do with that baby. And under Governor Tim Walz's watch, at least 8 babies were born alive during botched abortions between 2019 and 2021. All 8 of them died. None of them received any care attempting to save their lives. Most of them didn't receive basic comfort care either. And this is because of this omnibus bill that he signed called SF 2995, which repealed previous laws ensuring that a baby born alive after an abortion would receive medical care, and laws requiring that these births after an attempted abortion would be reported. Also in 2023, Wall signed the Protect Reproductive Options Act, or the PRO Act, or HF1, which enacted a quote-unquote fundamental right to abortion with no limitations at any stage of pregnancy. Okay, so that is her running mate. That's not the only state, of course, that has no laws that are protecting babies who survive these botched abortions. For example, there are actually several states, there are 5 states at least, who have no protections for babies born alive after failed abortions. That's according to Family Research Council. In the U.S., there are at least 277 known cases, and only a few states are actually required to report this thing, by the way, according to the Guttmacher Institute. There are at least 277 known cases in which an infant has been born alive following an abortion, and the actual number is likely much higher. And remember, Kamala Harris in 2019, as the furthest left senator in the Senate, she voted no on the Born Alive Infant Survivors Protection Act. I know that I've repeated this ad nauseum. I feel like not enough people know this, but this was a law that was, or a bill that was written by Ben Sasse that simply said Babies that survive abortions have to be given the same medical care as any other baby who is delivered. Kamala Harris voted no. This didn't restrict abortion in any way. Had nothing to do with the right to choose, quote unquote, had nothing to do with bodily autonomy because the baby is outside of the body. She voted no on that bill. Go read the bill yourself. It's very simple. Born Alive Infant Survivors Protection Act. It's not like a lot of these bills that Democrats push, like the FEMA bill or the border bill, where there's a ton of stuff hidden in it that Republicans can't get on board with. And Democrats turn around and they say they're not for border security. Well, yeah, because you included all of the stuff that Republicans could never get behind in this bill. That's not the case with the Born Alive Infant Survivors Protection Act. Kamala Harris voted no. She doesn't believe babies that survive abortion should be protected. And if you say that never happens, one, that's not true. Even if it's so rare, shouldn't we guarantee that those babies are given a right to life? They don't believe that babies have a right to life, period. Even babies outside of the womb. That's how grotesque they are. So don't buy into this toxic empathy. In September of 2024, so just a few weeks ago, the New Yorker profiled this Colorado abortion doctor named Warren Hearn for his work performing late-term abortions even to 35 weeks, okay? I mean, many babies are delivered at 35 weeks. It's still considered preterm. 37, 38, 39 weeks is considered full term. It really just kind of depends on what the doctor says. Typically, it's 38 weeks, but preemies who are born 35 weeks have a really, really good chance of survival. They may only need a week or two in the NICU. Really, at 24 weeks gestation, that's when a baby has a really good chance of surviving outside the womb, like 80+% chance. And there are babies who survive outside the womb before that. 19 weeks gestation, I think, is the earliest baby. I think his name was Matthew, and I'm pretty sure this was reported by CNN. This baby who survived, who was born preterm at 19 weeks and stayed in the NICU for a long time, but then ended up surviving. So 19 weeks is the earliest. Abortion up to 35 weeks. And if you're telling me, well, that just rare, I mean, no one wants that. No one wants that. So that's what Hillary Clinton has said. That's what Kamala Harris would say. If you don't want that, don't do it. Because at that point, like if you're suffering, if you have a health problem that requires you to no longer be pregnant, if you need very imminent chemotherapy, then you deliver that baby. You deliver the baby. Either way, the baby is going to come out, right? You don't have to have an MD after your name to understand this. You just have to have a couple brain cells. You don't have to kill the baby before the baby comes out to save yourself. There's no reason for that. And a fetal anomaly is not a reason to kill a baby. It's not, okay? You could say that's cruel. No, it's cruel to kill the baby because the baby might have a disability. And doctors aren't even always right. But even if they are right, if that baby has trisomy 13 or trisomy 18 or whatever it is, that's not a reason to kill the baby. We don't kill people because they have special needs. But of course, the New Yorker loves Warren Hearn for performing these late-term abortions. And again, that's the third trimester, okay? Patients come to him from all over the country because he is one of only a handful of physicians who can and will perform an abortion so late. The basic fact is that if you're pregnant, you're at risk of dying from that pregnancy. Doesn't matter whether you're happy about being pregnant. If having the abortion at any point in pregnancy is between 15 and 20 times safer than carrying the pregnancy to term, what is the possible justification for forcing a woman to continue the pregnancy if she doesn't want to? That is a quote from Warren Hearn. I don't even believe that that's true. I don't believe that's true because an abortion at this point, just medically speaking, and he knows this, he's an evil person, it takes several days for a baby to be aborted. It's a long process where you have to dilate the cervix, you have to insert the laminaria to dry up the amniotic fluid, hope that that suffocates the baby, starves the baby, because that's what actually helps keep the baby alive, that amniotic fluid. And then very often you've got to insert the chemical combination into the woman's womb, hopefully directly into the baby's heart, even though the baby instinctively draws away from the pain of the needle. You insert that chemical combination that causes cardiac arrest for that baby. And you hope that the baby is dead now after all of this horrific and painful torture. And this is a couple-day process. And then after that, delivery is induced. And so she's delivering a dead baby. And remember, Leroy Carhart, the late-term abortionist, said in the 1997 deposition that babies like that are like meat in a crock pot. That's what it felt like. How awful. How awful. Tell me how that is safer than delivering a baby alive. You have to deliver the baby. But here you're delivering a baby before your body is even ready to deliver. It's not even going into labor naturally. And you've had all this other stuff inserted inside of you to kill the baby first. That doesn't even make logical sense. Again, like, let's just think with our brains. The Atlantic also profiled him last year. Hearn estimated that at least half and sometimes more of the women who come to the clinic do not have medical diagnoses. They just want to kill their baby. Fact check, Kamala Harris. All right, we've got a couple more fact checks in just a second. Let me pause and tell you about our next sponsor. It's Jace Medical. With all the disasters going on right now, I think we're seeing how important it is to be prepared. That includes with all of our medical supplies. And so you need to make sure that you've got all the medication that you and your family need. If you're in an emergency situation, you can't get to the pharmacy, you can't talk to your doctor, you need a Jace case that is filled with life-saving antibiotics. Also, you can add things like an EpiPen or Tamiflu or ivermectin. Get a Jace Daily case. That's a year-long supply of the medications that you and your family rely on. You get that through a confidential telemedicine process. They make it really easy. Just better to be safe than sorry. Go to jace.com. Use code Allie at checkout for a discount on your order. That's Allie at jace.com. Okay, last thing on this. There are so many things we could talk about, but I just want to get to like a clip of the Elon Musk interview with Tucker Carlson and talk about that for a second. And so I don't have time to fact check all the things that they talked about on Call Her Daddy, but I just wanted to play this one that really, it just blew my mind. I don't like to call people dumb that I disagree with. I don't think that everyone on the left is not smart. I don't believe that. I think that they're really wrong. But even people that I disagree with, even people that sound vapid, I think can actually be very smart. But this clip really had me questioning that. Here's Sup 4.
I want to take a moment and can we try to think of any law that gives the government the power to make a decision.
I know what you're going to ask.
About a man's body. Let's
No.
just pause.
No.
Is there any law?
No. It's no.
It's so awkward. It's so awkward, first of all. As many people have been saying, the draft is a great example. Men have to sign up for the draft. They are legally forced to sign up for the draft. They are forced to sacrifice their own bodies, maybe for a war that they don't even agree with, maybe for a cause that they can't even get behind. So that's one example. But then, really, when you think about it, every law tells you, male or female, what you can and can't do with your body. That's our whole argument against abortion, that you can do what you want with your body until you violate the rights of someone else. You can punch the air as hard as you want to over and over again. You can quit your job to punch the air on a street corner and talk to yourself and dance to Justin Bieber. No one cares. But if you punch someone in the face, that becomes a problem. You're no longer punching the air or punching a tree, you're punching someone in the face. You violated their right not to be assaulted. So you can use your body as you would like. You can even have as much unprotected sex as you want to. But when that leads to the natural conclusion, the natural consequence of reproduction, well, then you've entered another sovereign individual into the equation. And that human being, just by nature of being a human, has his or her own rights, the most fundamental of which is the right to life, the right not to be murdered. Every law tells you what you can and can't do with your own body. You can't use your own body to violate the speed limit. You can't use your own body to body slam a random person. You can't use your own body to steal someone's lunch money. Like, it goes on and on. Come on. Like, let's just think for a second, please. And you can't pretend, by the way, that you are pro-woman if you believe in killing future women inside the womb. That's where human rights begin. So I don't know if there's very much crossover between the Call Her Daddy audience and the relatable audience, but maybe some of you have friends who watch or listen to Call Her Daddy, and you can share this episode with them. I just want you to think. I want you to think. I want you to be wise. I want you to be discerning. I want you to be smart. I want you to listen to things that make you think, that make you smarter, that make you wiser, that make you dig deeper into the truth, not things that make you feel good about being stupid and immoral. And that's what Call Her Daddy does in many ways. That's what Kamala Harris does. That's what Alex Cooper does. Maybe you can respect their hustle in some kind of sense, I guess, but they're hustling lost souls to hell, and they're giving you minds of mush and hearts of stone. And I just can't applaud that. You're better than that. You're so much better than that. All right, I'm going to get to an actually really interesting interview between Tucker Carlson and Elon Musk, and I don't have time to get into all of the different clips that I found interesting. It's a really fascinating interview. I don't agree, obviously, with everything that Elon Musk says. I mean, I agree with what he says about having children and there being meaning to life and children making you happy and all that. This is one example of like our almost agreement, but then also because he has several children from several different women. I'm pretty sure that he employed IVF and surrogacy and those things, and those are just not methods without their ethical issues. And of course, he's not always championing the Christian values that I hold dear, but I can appreciate him a whole lot. I appreciate a whole lot of what he has championed through X, how he has changed the game of speech and dialogue and discourse, and in that way, in a very positive sense, potentially changed the trajectory of the United States. I mean, I think that he is a hero for that. But also, I think that he has some really profound and very close to Christian ideas about right and wrong, the meaning of life, and specifically about empathy. I know that he's not listening to Relatable, and he hasn't read my book because it's not out yet, but I'm like, I want to find a way to send him my book because of what he says here in SOP 5.
What I see is what I call shallow empathy. Like, people have empathy for the criminals, but not empathy for the victims of the criminals.
Yes.
And so if you simply have, and I believe one should have deep empathy to say, like, what is the greater good for society? Is it better to incarcerate violent criminals and prevent them from hurting people, or to let them loose and allow those people to be hurt? And I think the latter is much worse.
Yes, what he calls shallow empathy, I call toxic empathy. It is empathy for those that the media hoists up as a victim at the expense of those on the other side. This is true when it comes to a man who says that he is a woman. You have so much empathy for this supposed feeling of being trapped in the wrong body, of wanting to finally feel authentic, liberated, like your real self. And you're so blinded to everything else because you're only focused on how they feel. But then when you back up and you say, okay, but what about these women over here? What about the girl who is now being forced to share a locker room with a boy to compete against this man? What about her rights? What about her privacy? What about her safety? What about her protection? But then also, when we back up even more, wait, what about morality or reality? What about true versus false? What about what is scientifically real? Empathy can be very dangerous when it blinds us to what is true and what is right. And he says a little bit more about this. I want to play one more clip, but let me pause and tell you about our last sponsor for the day, and that is NetSuite. So if you're a business owner, you need NetSuite. Over 38,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle. It's the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. You're closing the books in days, not weeks, spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. Whether your company is earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Go to netsuite.com/Allie. Download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/Allie. Okay, he expounds on this a little more, and I think it's interesting. Here's SOT 6.
Like, I believe in being compassionate about
Of
society.
course.
I believe that we should care about our fellow human beings. I think this is a good thing.
Of course
we
it
should
is.
not. We should not be. We should not be selfish and not care about others. We should care about others, but we should just care about others, all things considered. Like I said, care not merely just about the criminals. It's just one layer deep. You should also care about the criminals' victims.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, especially the criminals' victims.
Yes. Innocent people who get attacked and killed.
Yep. I mean, that's what social justice does. Social justice, criminal justice, racial justice. You're always actually supposed to have more compassion, more feeling for the perpetrator of crimes than the victims of crimes. And that's why they will cry out, defund the police, and they will completely ignore even the Black people who are disadvantaged by defunding the police. He said this, which I thought was pretty funny in a dark way. He said, you know what'll turn you from a Democrat to a Republican pretty fast is getting punched in the face while you walk down the street and then no action being taken against those who hurt you. Of course, the same is maddeningly true. Maddeningly. Maybe I should just use another adverb. It is also insanely true when it comes to immigration. When it comes to Kate Steinle, when it comes to Molly Tibbetts, when it comes to Laken Riley, all of these people had committed violent crimes and had escaped deportation in some cases, had escaped being permanently incarcerated as they should have been, or permanently punished and banished from the country because they are illegal aliens and they're seen as oppressed. They're seen as the underdog. And so via misplaced mothering, via toxic, weaponized empathy, women and even Christian women are manipulated into thinking that caring for the least of these and caring for the most vulnerable is to vote Democrat and promote social justice and open borders. You're harming not only the victims of these dangerous and chaotic and godless policies, but also the very people that you are claiming to help. I'm really glad that Elon Musk is so clear-eyed on that. All right, that's it for today. We will be back here tomorrow.